In this episode, let's take a small tour around the school in ancient Egypt to get to know the children who went there because it was not mandatory, find out what they learned, what games they played during the breaks, and the terrible punishments their teacher gave them when they did not obey instructions. School is compulsory in most countries today, but it was not the case in ancient Egypt. Out of 100 children, only 3 or 4 went to school. And these were the children of nobles, priests, and scribes. A scribe is a person whose job is related to writing. Scribes were the people who wrote messages from a king or nobles, who were in charge of noting down harvest and how much they would be taxed. They also listened to people's complaints, which they noted down so that they could be sent to the ancient police force. Nobles, priests, and scribes had to know how to read and count, and because boys very often did the same job as their fathers, they had no choice but to go to school. This was not the case for the sons of farmers, fishermen, bakers, or embalmers who transformed corpses into mummies. There was also another big difference in ancient Egypt. Only boys went to school, not girls. As there was no nursery or childcare assistants and nannies were expensive, most women stayed at home to look after the children and did the shopping, cooking, and housework. And if the family had barnyard animals, women also took care of them. So it was considered useless for women to learn how to read and write. Among nobles, women did not necessarily know how to read and write either, because they had a scribe who could read the mail and to whom they could dictate letters. But we know that some women could read and write. We think that they did not go to school, but instead had a teacher who came to their house to give them private lessons. We don't know anything about it. What we do know is that there was no nursery school, but the first educational institution, the Sebait, which means the place of learning, somewhat equivalent to elementary and secondary schools, and the Père Henrion, which means the house of life, which corresponds to secondary school, high school, and sometimes even university when it has a library. But this difference only works if there is an Sebait and a Père Henrion nearby. In many cities, there was only one school, so all the students were grouped in the same place. No text tells us at what age children could go to school, only that those who went there were young. But what does young mean? 4, 5, 6, 7 years? Given that people learned to read and write in the ancient school, it was possibly between the age of 6 and 7. Because we must not forget that there were no canteens and no women at the school to take care of the youngest children. The pupils therefore lived close to the school and had to be old enough to understand the complicated writing of ancient Egypt. Archaeologists have, for the moment, found only 2 ancient schools in Egypt. The first was located in Tel el-Amarna, the city of the famous pharaoh Akhenaten, and the second one was in Thebes. And I had the incredible chance to participate in the excavations of this school, so I can give you a lot of details. In antiquity, schools were not buildings on their own, as they are today. Schools were built inside large temples, like the one at Ramesseum, the temple built in honor of Ramesses II, at the foot of the Theban mountain. It's the 4th largest temple in the region, so it's normal that a school was found there. Ancient texts mention other schools, notably in the immense temple of Karnak, but for the moment archaeologists have not yet found the exact location of the ancient school. And if a school was located in a temple, it means that some of the priests of the temple were teachers. The school in Ramesseum was a very small school. Based on its size, it had about 30 students according to calculations. Imagine 30 students make up almost a class in today's schools. So it was small, on the one hand because, as you know now, there were not many students, and on the other hand because there were several schools in the area. We don't know where exactly, but the Ramesseum is located in an era where there were several large temples, and the ancient texts mention the schools, even though we don't know where they were exactly. The school of the Temple of Ramesses II was made up of several small rooms and a large playground. When it was very hot, which was always the case in summer when temperatures often exceeded 45 degrees Celsius, classes were either cancelled or held under large veils that were installed outdoors and attached to poles. In this way, as there was always a little bit of air, even when it was very hot, students and teachers were protected from the sun and could work better than in classrooms. At school, children started learning to write in hieratic. These were signs written very quickly to save time, unlike hieroglyphs, which took more time. Hieratic was the writing system of everyday life, whereas hieroglyphs were basically used to write on the walls of temples, palaces and tombs, on slide or on the back of statues. The writing that you see on the papyrus is rarely in hieroglyphic. Here, it's in hieratic. Students, therefore, started learning to write in hieratic, and if a child was destined to become a priest or a contour scribe, that is to say a craftsman who wrote on walls or who corrected the hieroglyphs written by an apprentice, he had no choice. After hieratic, he had to learn hieroglyphs. To learn how to write, children practiced on ostraka, that is, pieces of stone with a fairly flat surface, or broken pieces of vase. They copied signs according to a model drawn or engraved in stone by the teacher. Then they wrote signs from memory, and later they also had dictations. On the screen is an ostrakon, one side of which was used by the teacher, the other by the student. You don't need to be an Egyptologist to tell the difference between the two. The teacher drew beautiful lines and hieroglyphs without shaking hands, and the strokes, drawn with black ink, have the same thickness everywhere. The result is nice and balanced. On the student side, we see that it was more complicated. We notice that the child was not used to writing with a brush and ink. His strokes were therefore less confident, and his ink strokes much thicker, despite the red lines that the teacher drew to help him. In the episode The Pharaoh, I explained to you that the pharaoh had several names, and they were surrounded by a cord of rope called a cartouche. Here we have two of the names of King Amenhotep I, but there is a difference between the teacher's model and the pupil's hieroglyphs. Do you see it? On the right cartouche, written by the teacher, he wrote the hieroglyphs from left to right, while on the right cartouche, written by the pupil, he wrote them from right to left. If you missed the two videos decoding hieroglyphs, you can always catch up after this video. In addition to Egyptian writing, teachers told their students to count. If you are interested in the subject, you can also learn with the video Counting in Egyptian Too Easy. However, if addition was easy, multiplication, subtraction and division were much less so. In their teens, students began to specialize in learning their future profession. Those destined to become diplomats learned foreign languages. Those meant to become doctors learned both medicine and magic, since both sciences were supposed to heal and treat diseases. Those who were going to pursue a career in astronomy learned mathematics and the science of the stars and planets. Yes, recess did exist in ancient Egypt. First of all, because it's complicated for children to stay concentrated without taking a break, and teachers in ancient time understood it well. And also because in the playground of the Ramesseum, several marble games were found abandoned on the ground. Long before you, the little Egyptians of antiquity were already playing with marbles. Teachers in ancient Egypt had almost full rights over their pupils, meaning they could not only punish them, but also slap them and even eat them. One teacher even left behind a terrifying text. Don't spend a day lazing around or you will get eat. The child's here is on his back. If he obeys, it's to the blow that strikes him. Basically, it means that beating children on the back with a stick will make them listen and obey. So if a pupil didn't listen to what the teacher said, he could be beaten to make him listen more carefully or be more obedient in the future. Our text tells us that teachers could also whip or punish pupils by putting what they call shackles on the feet. We think that a shackle was a kind of very heavy wooden box that imprisoned the feet of a pupil. And how do we know it was made of wood? Because an Egyptian text tells us that once a rascal set it on fire. However, the story doesn't tell us whether he burned his feet while doing it. Well, in the end, school today is not that bad if you compare it to school in ancient Egypt.